Hello and good evening. I'm Melissa Idris. You're watching Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Malaysia's highest court today upheld the conviction of Najib Razak on several counts of corruption involving SRC International. He is now serving 12 years in jail. That's his jail sentence at Kajang Prison. Najib Razak is the first Prime Minister from a Southeast Asian country to be convicted and imprisoned. Now, let's begin our show tonight with an update from Astro AWANI correspondent Firdaus Azil, who has been covering not just Najib's final appeal in the SRC case at the Federal Court these past few days, but Firdaus has been covering this case since it first came up at the High Court. Firdaus, thanks for joining me on the show tonight. You've been there throughout the entire proceedings and you've been consistently updating us for on air and also online. For many of us who follow you on Twitter, I really feel like I was there with you throughout. But I am quite curious, Firdaus, about the atmosphere in the courtroom. Maybe you can describe the moments leading up to the final decision being delivered. What was the mood and the tone like in the room?
Okay, thank you. Actually, during the early morning, when we arrived there, we thought it may be just another day because we have been doing coverage on this high-profile case. Yes, it is very, very high-profile case, but we never expected that the verdict would be delivered by today. Even though some of the observers say that the verdict could be delivered within 3 or 6 months if the trial or the proceeding concludes by today. But then, right after, I tweeted that I reported that since the beginning, right before the trial starts with the submission and all. So the CJ, the Chief Justice, asked the defense, Shishamte, whether maybe you have anything to submit because it has been a repeated call since last week. But the Shishamte still adamant, still insists that he will not be submitting anything. So the moment, but when he informed the court that they have filed the motion to recuse for the recusal of the Chief Justice, then for us it's just another take. But it wasn't expected at all. But we just covered as usual. But when you ask about the mood in the court, we can see that Dato' Sri Najib, since the beginning, when he was seated in the dock, he was reading something, because last week we were told, I was told by someone that he could be, in the event of the defense still refuses to submit anything, he could be reading something. And I think that was it. And eventually it was really, he read something about his final appeal. Yeah.
Right. Well, you're absolutely right. Many of us were expecting this hearing to last until Friday as predicted, but today was a shock and sudden final judgment was given, and it has been a hearing that's been full of surprises. It's been full of twists and turns, some drama, I might say. What moments over the entire proceedings have stood out for you?
We actually thought, after the CJ, the Chief Justice, instructed for the court to stand down, because after that they wanted to deliver the verdict on the appeal of the recusal. We thought that's it. Because I've asked some of the observers, I asked some of the senior lawyers what would be happening today, what could happen today. They said maybe, most probably, highly likely that the Chief Justice would or fix a later date for them to deliver the verdict. So right after that, when you heard that the Chief Justice said, okay, it's time for us to deliver the verdict. So we were actually caught in surprise, but actually we were preparing for in case anything happened. But still, when she said that they were about to deliver the verdict, it was that moment that is different, because of course, I have covered different cases before. I have covered the proceeding during the High Court the High Court stage, during the Court of Appeal stage. But this one is totally different. It was totally different. I mean, the pressure was something, because even when I wanted to tweet that thing. I mean, the starting of the verdict, I had to be super extra careful, because this is the highest court in the country. But that was it. I mean, when she said, you heard that Chief Justice said that, okay, the warrant of committal to issue. I mean, that's it. I mean, you have exhausted every stage of appeal, and that's it, because the former Prime Minister is set to go to jail. Yeah. Basically,
right.
That's it.
Well, it's been a really long day for you, and you're still on duty, still updating us about the developments. Thank you so much for your consistent updates on the hearing, on air, as well as online. Firdaus Ali, Astro AWANI correspondent, doing his duty there. Thank you so much, Firdaus. We're going to take a quick break here on Consider This. We will be back with more. Stay tuned.
Kulit warga emas memang lebih kering. Sebab tu pacik gatal. Gunalah Su Balm Rapid Age Relief Moisturizer. 5 minit jamin beres. Jadi pacik boleh relax dan jangan garu ya.
Dari botol asal kami ke botol yang diperbuat daripada plastik kita semula. Kini, setiap botol air mineral semula jadi spritzer, memberikan nafas baru buat alam sekitar.
COVID-19 memperlihatkan kepada kita betapa pantasnya adaptasi teknologi di kalangan PKS kita. Niaga Awani dan Unified Business akan menyelami perjalanan kebangkitan semula PKS kita melalui segmen Jiwa SME setiap Selasa dan Khamis untuk inspirasi anda.
Transformasikan perniagaan dengan Unified Business, rakan digital pilihan anda. Hubungi kami sekarang dan jimat sehingga 50%. Jom Unified Business.
I'm Jennifer Walters. I'm a lawyer. I have great friends, a demanding job, and a frustrating family.
Your transformations are triggered by anger and fear.
Those are like the baseline of any woman just existing. Oh. Bruce!
Yes!
She-Hulk, Attorney at Law. Stream sekarang di Disney Plus Hotstar. Pelanggan Pack Movies. Aktifkan sekarang dan stream. Inilah medan pertempuran kelab terkemuka Asia. Di sinilah mereka mengejar kemenangan. Di sinilah mereka mencari kegemilangan puncak tertinggi. Piala AFC. Secara langsung di Astro Arena 2 dan aplikasi Astro Go.
Welcome back. Welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris. We're discussing what's next for Najib Razak after the federal court today upheld the guilty verdict of all 7 corruption charges in the SRC international case. He has begun his 12-year sentence at Kajang Prison. But is this the end of the road in the court system for Najib to overturn the verdict? Is his fate sealed? Joining us now is lawyer Lim Wei Jet. Wei Jet, I'm not sure whether you've gone through the broad grounds of judgment that was just released, I think, a few hours ago. But what are your initial thoughts, not just on the judgment, but how the whole proceedings unfolded?
Yeah, I'm immediately reminded of a quote by Martin Luther King Jr., which is that, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. The fact that once the most powerful man in Malaysia gets to finally face the consequences for his corrupt activities, it sends a very positive message on judicial independence, separation of powers, and the rule of law in Malaysia. And it also sends a message to politicians out there that no matter how wealthy or connected you are, don't steal the rakyat's money for your own personal benefit, because your day of judgment will eventually come. But on a secondary note, I also feel very good because the judiciary stood firm against tactics committed by senior practitioners in an attempt to delay the appeal. And I think that the way the judiciary stood firm to resist those kind of delay tactics is a sense a very good message out there to potential litigants or the litigants out there that, you know, just because you could hire a senior lawyer with your wealth doesn't mean that you can get away with this kind of antics and tactics to delay the appeal to your own personal benefit, that the court of law must be respected and you cannot abuse the court's process. I think that's a very positive message to junior lawyers and senior lawyers alike, and also litigants in court.
That's quite interesting, Wajid, that you've pointed that out. Is there a dimension of privilege in these in the tactics that were employed? I mean, the accused was very rich, once very powerful, the legal team very senior, as you mentioned, very established. So would it be fair to say that these tactics you wouldn't normally see if you didn't have these privileges? Well,
let's put it this way: if any other lawyer of lesser standing committed those kind of stunts, you know, you would have equally been, you know, reprimanded by the court very, very fiercely. And I think that it's very disappointing to see established lawyers do those kind of things. And I've never seen that before in my career. And basically, there's a line to be drawn. You know, just because a person is your client, it doesn't mean that you do everything that he or she asks you to do. At the end of the day, a lawyer is an officer of the court, and he should respect the court and not allow the court's process to be abused in such a manner in which we have clearly seen in Najib's appeal. That is very shocking to me.
Okay. Well, coming back to Najib's options going forward, he lamented today that he was denied due process. He said his legal team was new. He said that he didn't have sufficient time to prepare his case. Does Najib have any other avenues within the judicial process, either to seek recourse for his claims or his claims of misconduct, I might add, or to overturn this verdict that he disagrees with?
Well, there are two options for Najib. Number one is to apply for a review of the federal court. In other words, another bench of the federal court relooks at this bench led by Tengku Maimun to see if there's any grave or material error. But, you know, if you practice at the appellate levels, you will know that the threshold to cross for this kind of review cases is extremely high. For obvious reasons, we need finality of judgments, and the apex court's judgments could not be easily overturned. So Najib will no doubt try to argue that he was denied a fair hearing, there was breach of natural justice, so he could go on that road. The second option is to apply for a royal pardon, of course. So, you know, he has to apply for a pardon. A pardons board will deliberate on his application, and the Yang Dipertuan Agong will make a decision on the pardon. So those are the two potential avenues that Najib will probably exhaust in an attempt to free himself from Kajang prison.
Okay, well, can I come back so Najib's parliamentary seat, what happens then to his seat in Pekan? Does he lose it? Does he lose his position as MP automatically? Is he disqualified from future elections? What is the status now?
Okay, as it stands now, if he applies for a pardon within 14 days from today, and there is a pending pardon application that is not been decided, then he does not lose his Pekan seat until that pardon is decided. Insofar as contesting in the next general elections, he's not able to do so until he serves his 12 years jail sentence and another 5 years on top of it. Then only he can contest in the general elections. That is if there is no pardon.
Right. And that 12-year jail sentence, Wajid, is there a possibility that Najib may not have to serve the full sentence? You know, we often see on TV and dramas, they say, you know, you're let out on good behavior. Does that system work in Malaysia? How does the parole system work here?
I think if you are on good behavior, like any other criminal convict out there, then you can certainly apply to the authorities to reduce your jail sentence, but it certainly will not be reduced to, you know, a few months. So we are looking at a long jail sentence if he is not pardoned and if the review application is not successful.
Okay. And there's also, it's not just a jail sentence, it's not just a 12-year jail sentence, there's also a fine, 210 million ringgit. What do we know about where that money goes?
Well, it goes to the government coffers to be used by the government at its discretion. So it certainly does not go into anyone's pocket.
Okay, all right. And the other 1MDB trials, I think he still has ongoing court cases at the moment. Will Najib have to attend those if he is serving a jail sentence? And I'm just wondering, with those other cases, if he is found guilty and sentenced more jail time, will that be added to his current 12 years?
Well, he has a right to appear in those other trials relating to 1MDB or other cases. Insofar as the sentencing is concerned, if he's convicted in those other trials and appeals, then the prison sentence is it runs on top of the 12 years that he has already been imposed on. In other words, it does not run concurrently unless the court orders otherwise. So it's compounded in that sense.
And, I just want to circle back to what you mentioned about the conduct in court with the tactics by the defense team. When, the Malaysian bar has come out to condemn the conduct of Najib and his counsel, I'm just wondering how that, what implications we saw today in federal court might have for the legal profession, for those up-and-coming young lawyers who are watching this. How would you say what has happened within the past few days might leave an impression on the legal fraternity?
It leaves a very good impression because it tells and it sends a message that, just because you're a senior practitioner, it doesn't mean you can get away with this kind of circus antics and tactics to delay the court. And it sends a very good message to the young lawyers out there that, hey, you need to respect the court, don't let the court's process be abused, and, comply with whatever ethics that you're being taught in law school and the bar. And that should be the paramount. And just because you are 30 years in practice, it doesn't mean you can, ditch away those kind of principles and ethics and, cross these kind of boundaries just because your client wants you to do so. I think that is a very important message.
Wei Jet, thank you for joining me on the show tonight. Lawyer Lim Wei Jet there. We're going to take another quick break here and consider this. We'll be back. Stay tuned.
Keluarga ini membayar RM290 untuk satu malam di hotel. Keluarga ini membayar RM240 semalam untuk bilik yang sama. Bagaimana? Trivago memaparkan harga daripada ratusan laman tempahan di seluruh dunia, memudahkan anda membandingkan tawaran. Hotel Trivago.
Sehat ialah satu cara hidup. Cara untuk minum dengan baik. Makan dengan baik. Dengan bahan-bahan segar dan pelbagai cara yang sihat untuk memasaknya. Bakar, kukus, masak, campur, jus. Khas untuk semua amatur dan pakar. Gaya hidup sihat yang memasak di hujung minggu. Menyihatkan badan dan jiwa. Hidup sihat setiap hari bersama Panasonic.
Panasonic.
Kita di sini ada bersebab. Bukan kerana nasib. Kalau pilih untuk berjuang, jangan seinci pun berundur. Teruskan berjuang. Selagi bernyawa.
Bila menyelami erti warna sebenar kita, kita rasai kesuciannya.
Maui lagi istimewa daripada Ma dan Najib.
Kita rasai perpaduannya.
Kau ni mau kawan baik aku lah.
Asu ya.
Ini kelapa dulu bahasa orang.
Kita rasai keberaniannya.
I'm the best fighter pilot you have, sir.
Kita rasai kesetiaannya. Gemilang bersama.
Keturunan yang berbeza kita. Sedap kau cakap.
Bila disatukan, kita jadi lebih teguh dan lebih menyerlah.
Wah, cun gila.
Stream pelbagai rancangan bila-bila masa on demand.
Okay. Saya nak jadi world number 1.
Every game tu saya nak menang.
Gemilang di saluran 100 dan aplikasi Astro Go.
Inilah masanya. Darah, keringat, air mata dalam pertempuran yang memerlukan wira-wira. kejohanan dunia BWF 2022 secara langsung di Astro.
Semarakkan sambutan Hari Kebangsaan dan Hari Malaysia 2022 dengan mengibarkan jalur gemilang. Bersama-sama kita keluarga Malaysia, zahirkan rasa cinta kepada negara. Gelorakan semangat patriotik dengan kibaran bendera, lambang kemegahan negara. Hormati jalur gemilang dengan cara pengibaran yang betul.
Hello, I'm Melissa Idris. Thanks so much for staying with Consider This. Ira Azhari joins me now. She's the Senior Manager of the Democracy and Governance Unit for the think tank Ideas or Institute for Democracy and Economic Affairs. Ira, your thoughts on the Federal Court's decision today? How are you reacting to it?
Hi, Melissa. So firstly, I think just relieved, really, because I feel that, the last 2 weeks and also the last year in which the trial was going on, there's just so much unnecessary spectacle and I think a sense of relief mostly that, this entire thing is finally done and hopefully justice has been served and some hopefulness as well, right, that our institutions have worked, have served their purpose, and hopefully this will be the start to cleaning up our political system, hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. It has been, it's a sense of relief because it's been such a long time coming since the first, when 1MDB first broke. And then we had all the trials, and now it's the final appeal. So yes, you're absolutely right. It's a long time coming. The scandal itself, the 1MDB scandal itself, really captured international attention. And some even say that it tarnished Malaysia's reputation on a global stage. Ira, how far do you think the events of today might go in, reversing some of that damage?
Yeah, so I think the decision today marks an important milestone for our democracy. It's not common for a former Prime Minister to be found guilty in a court of law in any country, actually. So I think hopefully, Malaysia can be, hopefully be seen as an example in that sense. But hopefully it also means that we can start restoring trust within our own people, but also with investors, with people, business people who have, I think, in the last few years been very cautious with investing in Malaysia because of the instability in our political system. When our elections, no one knows, and of course, all this, the weakness of our institutions, I think, that has really sort of compromised the confidence of our own people and also others, and has really tarnished our reputation. So hopefully, today's decision is the start of repairing some of that trust and regaining some of the confidence that people should have in our democracy and in our institutions. Yeah.
Well, I'm just wondering, speaking of the 1MDB scandal, have we learned the lessons of 1MDB from the shortcomings in governance and the oversight that had allowed it to happen? Have we institutionalized these lessons?
Well, that's a good question. I do think that with what 1MDB did, I think, was sort of put it in people's consciousness that corruption at the very highest levels of the of the echelons of power happens, right? And and I think it really made people think about what people in public office should be doing and should not be doing, how much money people in public office should have and should not have. And I don't think people had these conversations, or people even thought about these things before. So, following 1MDB, of course, there have been other cases, other corruption scandals as well. And I'm not saying that's good, but I think, at least now people have an inkling of, what happens in the corridors of power and, what kind of abuses the system is susceptible to. So I think that is quite powerful, actually. And, the sort of the fight against corruption, of course, did not start with Najib or 1MDB. But I think with that case, people beginning to understand like the gravity of it, the impact of it, and just because the figures were just so astronomical, people try and understand what can we actually do with 2.6 billion, how many schools and hospitals we can build. So I think that's quite powerful, and that has been a lesson throughout this whole ordeal, and I hope that Malaysians won't forget it and will always remember 1MDB because of that, just to show you how vulnerable our institutions are to such abuses of power and corruption. Yeah.
Well, okay. You mentioned a bit earlier about the international community maybe having more confidence in Malaysia because we've seen kind of the rule of law in practice with this verdict. Given that there are other politicians facing corruption charges, what about the domestic sentiment? I'm wondering whether the proceedings and the judgments has strengthened public trust in the independence of the judiciary and why that is so important.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to be, a party pooper, but I think the answer to that question also depends on who you ask, right? So, I think it is very easy to be caught up in our own little echo chambers, about being very happy for this victory, which I am, and it's really important to acknowledge how important it is. But at the same time, it is also important to realize that, Najib also has his supporters, right? And there's a reason why his position in the party is still quite strong, even though he has been on trial for, the last 1 or 2 years, 2 or 3 years or so. So, we must always have that at the back of our minds, right? As much as, we think this is a victory and this is a great milestone for our democracy, there are also forces against that. There are also forces who think that, Najib has been wronged and, the justice system has been tampered with, So we must remember that. And, we must not, I think, be too sort of caught up in our own echo chambers. And what we should do is, to ensure that the judiciary, the justice system, our enforcement agencies like the MATC continue to work and be independent. And how do we improve accountability even within these institutions? So I think that is paramount. Yeah.
Ira, thank you so much. Always a pleasure talking to you. Ira Azhari from IGS, wrapping up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris, signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.